So who has someone's got to start it off, it's someone's got to stand up in the room and ask the question. And I have some other ones that came in over the last week or so, if we have time to cover those at the end.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can't see you,
Can
but I
you
can
hear
hear you.
me?
Yeah,
Perfect. Hi, all. Yeah. Hi, Richard. How are you? Hope you're well.
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Just a quick question. The first one I wanted to kick off with was when you're going through your listings, and as you know, I've got a short list and we're going through some together right now. At what point do you say to yourself, let's move on from this listing? So you've had a selling meeting, but there's just something in your gut saying, I'm not sure. What's the decision making around when you say you've got to move on? That's the question I got for you.
It's a great question because it really comes down to discipline, number one, and number two, where you are in the process. So when I see where you are in the process, if you're early on and you're still not aligned with what type of business is right for you, I say a lot of maybes, meaning I'll look at a lot of different businesses and recommend that you look at a lot of different businesses, even if there's a part of it, whether it be the revenues or the margins, um, not necessarily the location, because you don't want to start traveling all over the place to visit businesses that don't meet your criteria. But I'm really not picky at the beginning as you're trying to focus in on a particular business type that makes sense for your skill set. If you're already past that and say, hey, I know that I want to buy a digital marketing company or I want to buy a durable medical equipment company, and you're starting to look at those and you get the information, the first thing related to discipline is you have to be able to say fast no's. Okay. So fast no's and slow maybes is the way I look at it. And the fast no's come with your golden rules, which we've talked about before, but formulating and having your 5 golden rules. If they don't meet 5 of them, based on the information that you see at that time, it's a fast no. Not 4, not 3, but 5. And we know that the golden rules evolve. So when I look at a business, and the first thing, sometimes it's not evident in the listing itself, but I want it to be sales and marketing driven. So I need to potentially understand that from a call with the seller or call with the broker. High margins, that's easy to figure out from the most benign financial information that you have. If there's a demand in place, well, that might take a little bit of market research, but most of the time that's common sense. And then as far as exclusivity is concerned, again, that's a question and whether or not it competes on price. And very often, those, I know for me, anyways, I could probably answer 3 of those 5 real like that based on a generic listing. If not, I'll ask a quick question to the broker. And if it's a no, if it doesn't meet all 5, that's it. I'm done with it. You have to learn to say fast no's once you hone in on a business type. Before that, it's more like a laboratory, and be open-minded because you're in a learning stage. Okay. So that's how you evolve from one to the other. And some of that discipline, I mean, it took a lot of years for me because I'm a business junkie. So I get excited about a business and I start to see what the possibilities can be. And you know what it is? It becomes another SWOT exercise for me. Remember the staggering waste of time. So that's why you've got to get disciplined at the appropriate time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. Britton, I think you're up.
Hi. Trying to stay benign, but it's a question around, your idea of buying a great business at a good price.
Or a
And
good business at a great price. Yes.
what did I just say? Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, a good price. Yes, that's it, and that would be it. And I don't think I found a great business. I think that there are still a lot of room to grow, but it's a very solid business, is one we've talked about. But in terms of paying for the past, they do want a healthy multiple. As I've looked at it, it seems very just really well run. They've done a really good job stewarding this. My wife is asking me, well, can the business pay for the debt? And that seems always like a very difficult question to go, how much debt can I put on this? And so in that idea, your idea of you pay for the past, you examine for the present, and you're hopefully taking advantage of the future. Do you have an element of debt coverage surface ratio that you feel more comfortable with? And is that really a part of your um, consideration as it looks at, can it pay it? Because it looks like I'm able to pay the debt and still make a pretty good return. Like there's even additional profit that on my return on investment, my down payment, it would be close to, maybe 70%. And that's maybe give or take. I think it might, I'm worried it's all, I'm a big pessimist. And so I'm always worried it's going to trend down. I'm not going to grow sales, all this, scary things that you're looking at, but I'm like at the threshold of, I think I found the right business. It's just on this price point and am I overpaying?
Got it. So it's a great question. And yes, the debt service does factor into that. But I'm going to take you back for a second because I know in your particular example, the one we're talking about, there is actually, and I sent you an email this morning on it, there's actually adequate recurring monthly revenue,
Right.
demonstrative monthly revenue. It's not, you're not betting on it, this historical monthly based on contracts
Right.
that will cover your SBA debt and your seller debt. I mean, it might be off by, $1,000 or whatever, but it's not going to be significant. And that's a huge, huge relief because,
Right.
that's coming in, like you start the month knowing that that's going to be covered. So in that case, that would apply. However, to the larger question, when I do valuations and you use the Diomo business assessment method and you come up with a valuation and you agree to a price and terms with the seller, the way I look at it is follows. Of course, you want to make sure it's number one, is going to take care of the debt. The concept behind owner benefits seller's discretionary earnings ties into this because owner's to seller's discretionary earnings is the number that you have to service the debt, pay yourself a salary, and grow the business. So let's assume number one, the debt is serviced and covered. As far as paying you a salary, the opposite of going into your own business is to become a slave to your business. You don't want to do that. So it's okay to start off and take a little bit of a hit on your standard of living potentially, but it can't be that meaningful without having a path to say, if I, it seems pretty clear that I could do the following to move the needle a little bit. If you're going to have to struggle from the beginning financially, there's a little bit of that's very different than barely keeping one nostril above the water
Right.
because you need to have money to grow the business as well. So if the number just covers your debt and just gives you enough to live on, well, how do you grow the business? If you have to put capital in the business. So there's not a set number or percentage, but it's got to be enough of a cushion relative to the business. So for example, in the one you're looking at, I would venture to say that you probably need in that particular business 50 to 100 grand a year to explore some initiatives. That's my guess. Over and above
That's
what it
what's
pays.
that's
That's my guess.
and that's what I'm looking. That is, yeah, that's good. That's good because I think I'm looking at it's very similar to where it's meaningful a minimum salary to keep food on the table, keep all bills paid, and and paying the debt on top of that. And I'm even putting the buffer of needing to hire potentially an office worker
An
at
office
part
worker, right?
time. So
Right. I do, by the way, also and May, you weren't on the call this week with your team, but we had a good laugh because Mike is the founder of the search, along with Cordell Jacks, that May is a CEO and resident. But I said when I look at it for my working capital requirements, I always anticipate a decline of 25% for the first 3 months. It's a
wow.
big number, but the reason why you want that big number is you want to make sure you have adequate capital to cover a decline in the business. Like you don't want to get into business to find out you're going out of business. So that's the cushion at the beginning that you need. And for me, it's worked very well that as a hard number. So hopefully that gives you some clarity. Perfect. Okay, Mr.
Thank you.
Jamia, you got to take off you unmute yourself. There you
Oh,
go.
there we go. How's it going, Richard?
It's going great. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Britton kind of answered my question when you during the last part when you were saying about the cushion at first for working capital. So another question I got, I've been seeing a lot of course, I know you and Deb Curtis talk about a lot of these courses and a lot of things that just starting to pop up. Funny thing that keeps popping up, and the guy actually reached out to me. I'm not going to say any names, but it's about being an acquisition advisor.
Right.
Uh, about being an acquisition advisor paying $4,000 or $5,000 to join the community yearly. And basically, I mean, you're doing due diligence and connecting buyers and sellers, but that kind of don't make sense to me to pay that for anything when you're trying to buy and sell businesses. Why would you do that? So I would just like to get your opinion on the quote unquote acquisition advisors. And I believe that with your materials and after doing a few acquisitions, that you'll be able to help potential buyers and sellers with the process without having to, just from experience, without having to pay to be part of any course or anything.
So it's a great question. And yes, I mean, we help people through the process, and I'm not going to make my answer into an infomercial for our program. But here's the way I look at it. If there are some very good buy-side advisors, okay? But if you're going to spend money on a buy-side advisor, you need a dedicated advisor. And by that, I mean communities and that type of stuff and monthly meetings where everybody gets together. That may be positive, but you need one-on-one time. Like, because there's confidential information. There's stuff that's specific to you, that it's not generic. There's your hopes, your dreams, your particular situation that you can't really share with people. So if you're going to spend thousands of dollars, you need part of that, in my opinion, should be there should be a component of one-on-one time. I'm not going to, I know there's lots of good advisors, but the real good ones are dedicated one-on-one advisors, and they charge more than that. The real good ones, when I did my consulting for years, and I still have a few high net worth clients that I do consulting with, $750 an hour. But it's so you're not going to get you're not going to get terrific advisory work if you're paying $50 or $100 an hour. It's just not. It's unrealistic. So the parts of it is you want a real expert, and you want to make sure that there's one-on-one time. I know you had a follow-up question too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I explained it wrong. I mean, you're my expert, by the way. You're my expert, by the way. But
Brilliant.
The fee was they were trying to recruit for me to be an acquisition advisor.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about, by the way. So my categorical answer to you is no. I know who it is. Okay, I know. Okay, I promise you, no. Don't do
Absolutely.
it. Remember in Borat? Did you watch Sacha Baron Cohen Borat when they said, "Don't do it, Borat"? So I'm telling you, don't do it, Jamia. No, it's
absolutely
nonsense.
Not. Absolutely not. It's not an option. Like I said, I got my mentor. I have my expert, and the value that you provide is second to none. But yeah, I just always find it funny. I haven't talked to Dale this week.
No, it's not worth it. Now, there are a lot of people, by the way, and maybe every people will find it interesting on this call, an incredible amount of business brokers actually start out looking to buy businesses. And they end up getting so frustrated with the process that they say, hey, I can do this better. And so sometimes that's a path for people, and it could be a great path. But the program that you're referring to, you have two choices with the money that I'll tell you. One, light it on fire, or two, give it to charity. Don't do it. Okay. I think Andy, sorry, I put on and off my glasses, but Andy's sitting there. You look like on the screen about this big. There you go. Okay, man. How are you?
I'm good, Richard. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your sessions. They're amazing. Great value. Please continue doing that. I would love to join every one of them. So my question is around the process more. Right now, I'm in IOI stage, so I'm negotiating. Like I've set an IOI, negotiating with the broker. They'll get me in front of the seller, and then an LOI will happen. So within this time frame, what I want to understand is pre-LOI, what all should I have completed so that I'm ready for like a 60-day LOI to close period?
Okay.
What I mean is like things like bankers, equity investors, lawyers, accountants. I'm talking to all of them right now, but how far should I take the discussions pre-LOI so that post-LOI, I don't feel like, oh, I should have done this before I like negotiated and closed the LOI.
Got it. 4 steps. Number 1, you want to line up, retain, but not pay your attorney and accountant. You got to get them lined up. And it's especially important related to accountants because sometimes they get into certain tax periods And because of seasonality, you find out you got the LOI in place and they're too busy for 2 months because when they get into tax time, they're completely bonkers. So the like, line up your attorney, line up your accountant, get your engagement agreement in place. Do not pay them a retainer yet. You want to wait till you're going to present an LOI. You'll have to review that with your attorney. You're going to start spending a little bit of money, and that's okay. But your accountant is only going to come into place once the LOI is accepted. Okay, so those are those two. The financing part, even though I'm commenting on that as number 3, it's actually number 1. That's what you got to get going, because if not, you're going to scramble. And then what happens is if you don't have the financing lined up and you're going to have to write an LOI and then you want to get into due diligence and you don't have the financing, your head is going to spin because you're not going to have enough time to do all of it. So in order of those priorities, it's clearly financing and the 2 professionals, accountants and attorneys. And the 4th piece to the equation is start doing some of the stuff on your own. We're going to have a webinar next week on due diligence, but certain pieces related to the due diligence that you could start looking at potentially are, for example, if it's an asset-heavy business, you could start evaluating those assets, their meaningful, useful life that's left. What are the replacements costs? Similarly, you can start investigating the industry, the market, looking through the financial again to determine to put your game plan in place for your accountant and your attorney. And so you have those 4 elements. One piece is some of the due diligence you could start doing yourself. Then you got the financing, and then you got your 2 professionals. And you'll see next week when we talk about about due diligence, getting yourself organized is critically important. So I don't want to go into next week's subject matter, but one thing that you also want to do is, if you're not organized, you better get organized fast and start to compile a master list broken down of all the categories that you need to investigate, because you're going to need to assign tasks to people. And you have to manage that list from the moment, almost now, right through to closing. So those would be the 4 that I would look at. And clearly at the top of the pyramid is getting your financing in place.
And just a quick follow on, when you
Sure.
say financing in place, do I need a term sheet or just like a verbal discussion with the commercial financing rep that I'm talking to at the banks? So for instance, like I'm doing Canadian search with Canadian banks, so not SBA.
Yep.
So these commercial banks, like top 5, should I get like a term sheet before
Yep.
LOI gets
Yes.
signed or not?
Yes. Because your LOI is going to have a condition that it's subject to financing.
Right.
And the seller looking at it and say, well, subject to financing, that's great, but prove you're going to get the financing, or that you at least qualify. Right. So
Okay.
yes, get a term sheet. The more you can button up, the better. By the way, where in Canada are you calling from?
Toronto.
Toronto. Okay.
Yeah.
I lived on Yonge and Bloor.
Oh, wow. I'm on Yonge and Shepherd, so
Okay.
just
Oh
slightly
yeah, there you
north.
go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's a
Yeah.
great
Nice.
area. If
Yeah,
you're ever in Toronto, we should do a meetup. Like
my
Rachel.
pleasure. I have a folder in my Outlook of clients to visit, and lots of
Yeah.
them I have over the years. So whenever if I don't do anywhere near as much traveling as I used to, but whenever I've traveled for business, whatever, I always go through that and say, is there someone in Dallas? And that would be
Okay.
C included, but I'm not going to visit. If there's someone in Dallas, or for wherever I've gone, Toledo, Ohio, crazy places. So I always look someone up. So yes, I will take you up on that offer. My favorite restaurant in the world was on King Street. They closed, Kit Kat. I used to love that place. So
Oh,
I
I'd
heard they
heard
closed.
about that. Heard
Yeah, I
about
heard
that.
they closed. Well, nice to see you.
Great.
Thank you for
Nice to see you,
joining.
Richard. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, there's Mary and Todd. We had a bunch of emails this week. Okay. How
Oh,
you
yeah.
doing, guys?
Hey, Rick,
Okay.
pretty good. How about you?
Nice to meet
Terrific. Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, and so first I just want to say thanks, a heartfelt thanks for really helping us out with the LOI and giving us that guidance and the confidence and actually getting that over to the broker. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we lost the deal. We actually were the most liked, by the seller. However, we they felt a lot more comfortable in going with the other buyer because they could close within the 60 days. She was actually moving out of the country within
I
60
remember
days.
that.
And we're the, first time buyer, with the business. And so she wanted to sell it to us. She just didn't feel comfortable enough as far as getting it closed in time. So we have to move on to the next one. So going on to the next one, we have a list of different types of businesses that we're interested in. And there's one that I want to talk to you about, one industry, and that's the HVAC industry. Mary really likes those. And I know usually I think she likes them because the profit margins are really good. And from what we're seeing, the cash flow as well is, where we want them to be. But the thing is, I get a little concerned, I guess, about the licensing requirement. And I don't know, maybe if you could just comment on that. If we're not in that industry, should we still consider those? The challenge, I think, with those, with the license, if the owner has the license and they're leaving, they don't want to tell the company or, the employees of that company that he's leaving because they might exit or something else might happen, right? So you can't find out potentially if there's maybe someone in there that has a license or that could be go take that the test. And I hear those tests are very difficult to pass a lot of times, like an 80% failure rate. And so that's like a big concern. You can't talk to an employee if they want to step up into like a management position or go and get a license or, so I just kind of want to know your thoughts on, buying a company with a license when we are not in that industry.
Okay, so great. There's a lot there, but I wasn't texting everybody when I was looking down. I was writing notes, so I make sure I cover everything. So as far as the deal that we were working on, sometimes the best deals are the ones we don't do. And what I mean from that is there's two parts of that. One is sometimes they just turn out to be bad deals. And the other part is deals that businesses we would have loved to have bought and we don't get the deal. So you have to look at it. There's just hopefully good learning involved. And the fact that you went through this process, put through an LOI, you did it expeditiously, because as I remember, you had to get it done quickly. We were flying back and forth with emails. It was a really nice business. I get all that. I understand, as you disclosed that they were taking another position and out of the country. So you have to look at that and you don't look back. It's a great learning opportunity. And most importantly is the fact that you pulled the trigger on an LOI, because some people just get stuck in the mud and they can't even write an offer, and you got to write offers. So, that experience is nothing but positive. As far as the HVAC industry is concerned, there's a lot of activity in home services and HVAC, and multiples have gone way up because there's a lot of roll-ups going on. That hasn't impacted the lower end much. The good news is you buy a business, there's that type of business, there's almost always a buyer. So you run a business for X period of time and you want to exit, even the smaller ones, there's generally, the buyer pool is quite large for them. So that's on the positive side. The negative side is 100% related to what you articulated, which is the licensing. In a lot of states, you can trade off someone else's license. So you can trade off the owner's license for a period. You can trade off an employee's license for a period. Oftentimes, you can trade off a third-party license for a period. And I believe the SBA even allows that trading off on the former owner or employee license. So there's a couple of steps to this. The first thing is you have to understand that even if you trade off someone's license for a period, the goal is you have to get your license. Because if not, you're always beholden to someone. Mm-hmm. And so if it's not easy, it's a tough test. I have faith in you guys. You can do it. You maybe not so much, Todd, but Mary can get her license. So you will be able to get your license, but it's a matter of time. But the agenda has to be to get your license, because if not, you're always someone else is holding your you-know-whats, right? And so as it relates to the business, if the seller holds the license, that would be great, and you can trade off that, but you need a fallback plan. And your fallback plan has to be potentially one of the employees. So, because you have to have two licenses in place, because you've got none. So you want to make sure if the owner gets hit by a Pepsi truck, you don't want to be out of business. So one of the employees or a third party. So a contingency to the deal has to be related to meeting the employee that holds the license. Because the reality is they may not even be comfortable with you trading off their license. You do something stupid, they lose their license. Right. And so you have to have that as a deal contingency. So the way I would go about this is, number one, make sure it's legal within your state to trade off someone's license. Number one. Number two, if you're going the route of SBA financing, just get clarification as to who within the company can qualify, whose license you can use to qualify the licensing requirement. Is it an employee? Is it an owner? How long do they have to stay? Do they have to retain equity? Those criteria. The third thing is relative to what is going to be involved with you obtaining your license. So there's those parts. Now, sometimes I've seen, these transactions where, for example, Mary likes the HVAC business where people go in and buy less than 100% of an HVAC company so that they keep all the key people, the owners in place, the licensing, and it's bought from a cash flow perspective, and you learn the business and you have a good partner in place. You can't structure a deal with a meaningful enough amount of the seller retaining equity for it to pass the SBA. Because I think 10% is the max. Maybe it's 20, but I think it's 10%. So I would investigate the license heavily, because that could be the bump in the road. Okay. And so your concern with that is 100% correct, and it's right at the top of the list.
Okay, that's helpful.
I have a question. What do you
You
think?
can ask two. It's the same price.
No, this is a little bit different. What do you think of e-commerce business? And a lot of times it seems like they tend to have contractors as their employees. And but most of them that I've seen, these contractors work solely for the e-commerce, business. I mean, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Or what do you think of that?
Well, I'm smiling because for me it's a good thing, because Sia falls into that category, and she's a gem. So yes, and in my business I use a lot of third-party contractors that not work full time. So the first thing is, if a contractor is working full time for that entity, they're not a contractor.
Oh,
They do not comply with 1099 laws.
okay.
Oh.
If they're first time. Now, the IRS has become very strict with 1099s because people do put people in 1099 position because they save the withholding taxes. And so there's criteria, like, for example, one of the things is they can't be forced to report to any meetings. They can't be required to meet certain result requirements. It's pretty strict. If you look at IRS.gov and 1099 requirements, you'll see there's like a laundry list of how they must comply. So the first thing, you want to make sure that they're in compliance. Now, if they aren't, it's not terrible, because you'd have to structure that contractor as an employee going forward. But what you need to do is then the exercise and say, well, we paid them $1,000. Their expense was $1,000 as a 1099, but now coming on board, it's going to be $1,200. So you have to adjust the earnings to accommodate bringing on board as a W-2 employee. I like e-commerce businesses. I mean, they're a nice model. Certainly like to see one where you have more of a proprietary product as opposed to an Amazon store or something where everybody's selling the same stuff and you're fighting because you have to be really on top of the business. Some of the things to be aware of: margin should be good. They're nice to operate because it allows you a nice lifestyle because you can operate it where you want it to operate from. One of the big things that you need to be concerned about is making sure that there's a bulletproof non-compete in place, because I can sell you, well, I wouldn't do this obviously, but I can sell you an e-commerce business and change my name to Parker Richard and open up as a competitor like an hour later. And I could open up from anywhere and you'll never find me. Okay. And so you have to be that's why I like to keep them locked in with a seller note. So that they don't do anything untrustworthy. It's very important to understand why they're selling. Manoj has been going through a bunch of these, very understanding exactly why they're selling. Are they selling because they're retiring? Then you want to know, and in the course, if you go into the section, we talk about all of those follow-up questions. Is it because they have other business interests? Well, could be a potential concern. You want to really understand why they're exiting the business, especially if they're making a lot of money. Because an e-commerce business, if you manage it properly, you can operate it with relative ease, freedom, if you will. So if you have one that's throwing off a lot of money, why would you sell it?
Right.
But I do like the model. I mean, I really do like the model because I think it provides, it's always interesting because stuff online changes all the time. So if you're intellectually curious, that's fun stuff. And it gives you a lot of flexibility lifestyle-wise.
So what would the profit margin, what's a good profit margin for e-commerce?
As much as possible.
As much as possible?
As much as possible. It depends what they're selling. So let me give you an example. I'll give you two, because Amazon stores are one where they're selling a product and there's and might be third-party fulfillment, and you got to be in like a 35% gross margin. You take a look at our business. If I don't take into account all the expenses, SIA's exorbitant fees as an example, or anything related to social media. I'm leaving also. I'm just talking about cost of goods. Our product is 100% profit. We sell an information product. There's no cost of goods. Yeah, I have lots of expenses. I just went through this with someone, related to the social media and a virtual assistant and, the marketing cost and the editing but it should be if the e-commerce company owns the product, it's their product, the margin should be very significant. And especially, I'll tell you, like if you're thinking about e-commerce, like for me, the greatest e-commerce business is an information product.
Mm-hmm.
You could potentially go on subscription, but there's no cost of goods. You can fulfill it easily. There's no inventory. There's no warehousing. The margins allow you to do a lot of creative things.
Okay.
And if you come across a couple, send me the listings. I mean, we can go through them together and see, pros and cons and which ones make sense or not.
Yeah, well, I went through one, and I think and it's not, they don't sell, to eBay or any of that stuff, but it does help building people that want to go into selling and to help them develop things, right?
Oh, neat.
And I was looking at the profit margin. So I was doing the money math to see, and the profit margin seems not as high. It's like 12%.
No, you're talking about the cost, you're talking about the gross profit, selling revenue minus the cost of goods, or you're talking about the net?
I'm talking about the net, you're right,
you got to be at least 10%. I mean, that's, and you're talking about if it's an information related product, it should be much more significant. If it's a subscription-based business, it should be much more significant. There shouldn't be a whole lot of cost of goods attached to that model, if I understand it. But certainly, separate and apart, if you want to send me the listing sheet with just a brief overview, we could dig into a little bit.
Okay.
It does seem low.
Right. So I told the broker that I wasn't interested, and but I can tell him that I may, and I'll have you look at it, and you can because I have the sim and everything.
Yeah, you can, and because of our relationship, you have our materials. I'm covered by your NDA, so I could read through the sim, no problem.
Okay,
Great.
Thank you.
My pleasure, and nice to meet you face to face. Okay, Tomas. Oh, Tomas.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really well. My deal flow is working maybe too rapidly these days.
Impossible.
Yeah, I know they're coming out of the woodwork. So I appreciate I put the effort in, and so it's paying off. I'm going back. It's actually one you and I talked about. I had a very different valuation than the owner. It's a great business. He's not looking to sell to anybody. He's not in a rush to sell. He knows, there's money on the table that he's like, after chatting with me, he's like, I'm going to chase after this. I can go get that money, and he is getting it. Like he's adding sales, which is great. So I'm like, it's proof in, why I think it's a good business, monthly reoccurring. He's opened up to he wants more than what I offered 700. He's like, oh, it's worth 100 or 1.3 million. He's now opened up to terms. He's fully opened 100% owner financing. At first we were talking about 5 years. In our last conversation, he's like, well, I'm open to an 8-year maybe term, or I know we talked about 7% interest. I could do 6, or so he's like, so I have a lot to play with there. One of the pieces that he threw out, so I'm curious about one to play with. Two, the other is he was talking about well, we could do a 15-year amortization and pay it back over, over whatever that is, 8 years. He's not interested in any earnouts. Anything based off of my performance, and maybe that's just the baldness or something. I don't know, but
Well, so I'll tell you, if you deem it to be a really good business and it's growing and there's margins or whatever, well, he doesn't need to sell it with an earnout. That's just the reality. And if you're getting, sometimes you want to look at this. Here's an interesting way that I find helpful to look at some of these deals. I'll pay your price, you take my terms. Because the money oftentimes is made in the terms. So in this particular situation, when he's talking about a long-term amortization, you might have a balloon payment. So in other words, it's structured like a mortgage over 15 years or what have you. Your payment is less, but after year 8 or 12 or 9 or whatever, you pay the balance of the principal that's owing. Those are always very favorable. I look at them in two ways. One, I prefer to know what my monthly cost and annual cost is going to be on servicing the debt. I never want to do an amortization on a hope and a prayer, meaning that I have to build a business to a certain level by a certain period of time in order to pay the balloon. If I look at it and say I could keep putting money away every month, quarter, or annually, like, saving money for a rainy day and put it into a separate account, knowing that I'm going to pay that balloon with comfort, because you don't want to be at that stage where you have all of a sudden a gun to your head and you got to make a payment for $1.3 million or $800,000 and you don't have the money. Now, it is possible at that point in time, if you run the business for X number of years, you could potentially recapitalize the business. But it sounds to me like you've got someone that were the only difference is everything is favorable except the price might be off. If you're getting in there with no SBA commitment and a big seller note, well, you know what? I know the buyer assumes the greatest part of the risk in these deals. And so the buyer has to win, the seller has to be relatively happy. But if you're getting incredible deal terms from the seller, you got to bend, because it's really going to be advantageous to you. You're getting into a business with very little to no money down, which is highly unusual. And so you have to be prepared to pay a premium for that.
Okay. I also look at it, it still means I can buy another business with the SBA money.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. Separate and apart. You'll have to put it, it'll probably go on your financial statement as to what that looks like. But as long as the debt coverage is good, and keep in mind with the SBA, my understanding is that if you go to buy a second business in the same related industry, you can, as a business owner. You can't buy an HVAC company and then buy a candy store. You could buy an HVAC business and then buy another HVAC business, and then they'll finance you. That's the way they look at business owners. But yes, you can definitely, that's definitely a great approach. You want to get into the first one, learn the business, get comfortable with it, get immersed. 6, 9 months, 12 months later, you're feeling good. You could always look for opportunities to, for other acquisitions. A great way to build, great way to build wealth.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll play with that, and I'm going to send you my new kind of terms or play sheet on there.
Sure.
Second question. My wife is very interested in it's a franchise. She doesn't do numbers. I'm doing the numbers. It seems great. Like when I play and I look at it, but I know I'm not a franchisee. Like I don't do rules. But what and I guess that's like I read the chapter in the piece, but what should I be diving into? Like, what are my big like flags on it's got great support, or yeah, seemingly so. They're on top of pretty much everything that I've run into. I'm like, what's the catch is where I'm at.
Got it. Is it a new location or an existing franchise?
It'd be a new location of an existing franchise. So the company's been around since 96. They had this guy, Dennis Mulgano, come in and help them out to set up franchises. He's done a bunch of franchises. And so he's got this newer franchise piece. I don't want to say what it is, but
no problem.
I haven't signed the NDA.
No, that's good. Okay. So I'll tell you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But they've only been franchising since 2020.
Okay. So I'll tell you my take on franchises. There's two parts to this. Number one is franchises are for people that need support and don't mind giving up control. So the way you've talked and we have conversations, you're the opposite, and that's why you can't buy a franchise. But for a lot of people, and especially it's a great entree into entrepreneurship. That's the first thing. The second thing is I don't like new franchises. This is not a new franchise, but I like buying resales. Because I think if you're opening up a new location or a new concept, that's just barely above a startup. And with startup, the failure rates are massive. Yes, there's a little bit of a track record, but it's just a little better than a startup because you never know. With a franchise, yes, there's some wonderful attributes to it, and for the right people, they're fantastic. Got a recipe that's proven in multiple locations, a certain amount of time under certain conditions. That's why I love the idea of buying an existing franchise. So you marry the best of a franchise with an existing business. The nice thing about a franchise, but not to be completely discouraging because she needs to do her investigation. The beauty of a franchise is that while the due diligence happens on two fronts, because you've got to investigate the business and you've got to investigate the franchisor, the best thing you can do is you go speak to 25, 30 franchise owners.
Okay.
People that got new ones. Okay. If that's the road you're going down. And again, if she really likes this banner, this system, I'm all in favor. Buy one that's already up and running and has a track record, because then you get the benefit of it. But your first stop is going to speak to existing franchisees.
Okay. Thank you.
And you could really do it's nice because you have a huge advantage. Because usually people don't rave about the good things, but they start going nuts about all the things all the bad stuff. So you'll hear all the bad stuff too, which is what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks.
My pleasure. May, the famous May.
I didn't know I was famous, but thank you, Richard. Always great to see you. And thank you. These sessions are awesome. So I came across a sim this week that the buyer only wants to contemplate selling the business and his real estate.
The seller wants the seller. Okay.
The seller wants to only sell his business and his real estate. I'm not interested in buying real estate. So do you think that's an automatic no, or do you ever see a creative way, or are they really always saying definitely yes, they must sell the real estate, or is there some way around that, do you think?
Yep, there's some way around it. As a matter of fact, I figured if we don't have enough questions today, how do you like this? The first question that I had on one that are about if buying business with property. Okay, so yes. So here's a couple things to it. The first thing is you want to make sure if you could speak with the seller and say, I'm not interested in the property potentially, because it may be the most effective way to blend a loan, because oftentimes you could mitigate your downside in an acquisition by acquiring real estate if the numbers make sense. I'm not a big fan of buying real estate at the same time because you're deploying capital, and it may not make most sense, but it can. So the first thing is to look at the financials and make sure that the business has been charging itself, the property owner has been charging the business the right rate of rent, because businesses have a tendency, you own a business, you own the real estate, oftentimes they undercharge and oftentimes they overcharge. They undercharge because, they've owned the property for a while and the business benefits, but it's false, because if you were to buy that business tomorrow and the property, or the property is sold to someone else, or the owner decides to lease it back to you, it's got to be on those same exact terms, or you have to adjust your earnings down. Similarly, a lot of them overpay because they want to pay down the equity in the property through the business. And so they do. So the first thing is the examination of the numbers. The second thing, making sure that that's correct. And you're also going to incur, if you own the property, insurance, taxes, and maintenance. The second thing is you can potentially buy the business and someone else buys the property. And there's companies who do that. And afterwards, I'd have to dig it up, but there's one I just spoke to not long about, probably about 6 months ago, that does these exact type of transactions where an individual buys the business and they buy the property if it's for sale alongside the business, and they lease it back to you. So you can buy the business without the property. I'm not sure if it's different in Canada, but I think that's worth investigating as well. The third part to the equation is making sure when you do the valuation, these are two separate and unique valuations. You do not value the business together with the property. Property will be appraised value, third-party independent appraiser that you could both agree upon, and the business has to stand alone as your valuation to it. So in a long-winded answer to your question, yes, it is not. So no, it is not a fast no. There are options that are available to you. I would tell the seller, look, our choice is not to acquire the real estate. That does not mean that we're not going to, and we may bring in a party to buy the real estate alongside it. However, I need to get some basic financial questions answered relative to being able to make the decision. And I certainly want to continue. If you like the business, don't discount it because you have, and say no, because you do have some options.
Great. Okay, that's so helpful. Thank you, Richard.
Of course. And nice to see you as always. We have anything else? Any hands up? Baby hands up? Nothing? Okay. So if anybody thinks of stuff, I've got a couple of questions that came up here during the week. And so I'm going to go through these. The first one is related to May, and I've taken these right off of email. So again, excuse me for looking down. We talked about with property. So separate the two entities, and if it's owner-occupied real estate, are they charging market rate? Could be higher, could be lower, but you need to adjust your seller's discretionary earnings up and down to reflect market rate. And if they're going to remain owning the building and they're going to lease it to you, so you want to understand what that is. If you're buying it, you want to understand what your mortgage payment is going to be, plus your insurance and taxes and everything else in there. One other question is, if there's multiple owners and all owners and one or all want to leave, what do I do? So you need to find out, and we see this frequently. You look at a business and there's two owners. One wants to stay or both want to go. You need to get a very clear picture. For example, if two owners are leaving, what does each one do? Because the concept is you are replacing one of them. You can't, I don't care how smart anybody is on this phone call, you can't replace two full-time people. And very often it's completely separate disciplines. So you see this where they add back the salary of both owners. And that's BS. I mean, you can't take the role of two people. So you can only add back one, and then you have to calculate how much it's going to cost to replace that other owner. Furthermore, you want to make sure that the whole thing makes sense. If you're taking two people, two owners are retiring, and they both have really important job. One takes care of operations, one takes care of sales. I mean, you don't even know who to hire. If you're an operations person and then you got to hire a salesperson, until you learn that business, you don't even know what a good candidate is to potentially hire. So at the very least, the one area where the partner works that you're not familiar with, that's not your greatest strength, that individual has to stay for a meaningful period until you engage the right person to take over that function. Is that clear to everyone? Because you'll see this quite a bit. And you'll also see, like, as a double click to that, where it's a husband and wife, and the wife is running the business. And she said, my husband, he just takes care of the books. He comes in, 2 hours a week. And no, he doesn't. He comes in more, and he also helps in the warehouse, and he does some deliveries, and on it goes. So you need to really understand that job. Seller wants to meet me. The seller wants to meet me with their broker and possibly their attorney, but asked me not to bring my attorney. No, the answer is no. And I think maybe when we were in Mexico, I think it was Greg that talked about it. You don't want to be outnumbered at the table if possible, but certainly you don't want to get into conversations with details that you're not in a position to answer. The flip side is, if you're forced to have that meeting for whatever reason, you get some pushback. Every question they ask you that you're not immediately certain of and confident in, just say, well, I got to speak to my attorney. Don't let yourself get bullied into any type of answers, situations, or commitments if you're not 100% comfortable. It's also a bad sign that someone would look at it that way, that feel they can get you into a room and bully you. So you want to be aware of that. And it does come up. And so again, just be aware of your environment and don't get yourself painted into a corner. Spending time. Oh, okay. Sorry. Here is a post-purchase plan. Here I said, this is the category of craziness I've seen online this month. Okay. So there was a video from someone. It's talked about a post-purchase plan. You buy this business and here's what you're supposed to do. Okay. Now I'm a fundamental believer in you do nothing material until you get the guts of the business in your belly. You spend the first 3-6 months really learning that business, and then you could make some decisions to grow the business. But this was the context of the video where a business broker advised that you should, if you buy a business, you should not spend any time scaling it. They said, and I quote, "Scaling is failing. Keep it as is. No changes." Scaling, in their estimation, equals a startup, and there's only a 1 in 7, these are their numbers, a 1 in 72 chance of success. I don't know where the hell they got that from. So instead, pay off the debt, don't grow the business, and build your equity. Well, here's my answer to that. This guy is a complete moron. If you ain't scaling, you are failing. It's like, did anybody used to watch Family Guy? Anybody watch Family Guy? Remember Cleveland Brown? If you ain't sweating, you ain't eating. Okay. So if you ain't scaling, you are failing. Okay. Guaranteed. It was a ridiculous concept. It wasn't the idea of saying, well, you shouldn't, take your time at the beginning, learn the business. It was, no, don't scale the business. Just keep paying down the debt that you incurred to buy the business, and then you'll have equity. Every business that doesn't grow declines. That I will bet every penny I have on. It's just a matter of time. So the concept is, yes, when it comes to valuations and evaluating a business, growth is very sexy. Stability is valuable. That's what you want to buy at the beginning. You want to acquire a business that you can count on status quo stability. But the goal is to grow that business, whatever level you're capable of taking it to. Because if you got to get up every day with the idea of getting bigger, better, and faster. If not, the business is going to go backwards. And so that concept of just do nothing. Yeah, you do nothing for 90 days and you listen. And I've often joked, like, day one, you don't even know how to turn off the alarm. That's okay. It's going to take you 6 to 9 months, but then you've got to focus on growing the business. So if you don't feel that you have the tools to do that, it's not going to be the right business, because ultimately it will decline. Here's another question. I have 2 more. I'm going to set up an entity to acquire the business. Not sure of the structure, LLC, S, or C Corp. The goal is to have a corporate veil and avoid any personal guarantees. Sounds great, doesn't work. So when you acquire a business, whether it's a seller note, if you have any financing in place, you are going to sign a personal guarantee. There's no avoiding it, kids. Now, what you don't want to do is if you're doing a seller note, you don't want to pledge personal assets. The assets of the business collateralize the note, but it's going to have a personal guaranteed component. And just because you set up an LLC or an S Corp is not going to remove that from the equation. No. So yes, you're going to need an LLC or an entity at some point, but that's not going to eliminate your requirement to put up a personal guarantee. When you go down the road of SBA, the guarantees, the collateral are potentially much more substantial, but there's no avoiding personal guarantees. And in these transactions, that's why the first chapter of our course is why buy a business and what to consider, because that's something you need to think about. Are you comfortable with that? Is your spouse comfortable with that? Whatever the case, you're a team. And so everybody's got to be on board and make sure that, there's some people that are just not comfortable if a lender requires you to collateralize the loan with your home. And I'm not going to pass judgment on whether or not you should or should not be doing that. But, you're in this, and your spouse, partner, what have you, they're in it as well, if that's what they're required to put up. So you have to be sensitive to that and make sure everybody's swimming in the same direction. But avoiding personal guarantees, it's almost inevitable. It's inevitable that you're going to have personal guarantees. Now, I'll give you some alternate situations. I bought 14 companies. I can go get a commercial loan to buy a business and avoid SBA loan and not have to put personal guarantees. But you get to a certain stage, you'll be able to do it. But at the beginning of your first entree into entrepreneurship, and especially if you're going the SBA route, that's just part of the equation. There's no avoiding it. It's just the level to which you can negotiate the least amount of potentially personal collateral. On a seller note, like the deal Tomas is working on, that will be a personal guarantee, but the assets of the business are the collateral. Here I have one, and I love this one. And this was on a forum. I try not to spend too much time on Facebook groups and all these Reddit groups, but every once in a while, if I'm not sleeping at night, I get a little curious. So I sometimes look at some of these groups. I think I've joined one and unsubscribed to probably 20 because it's all nonsense. But I read one this week, which I thought was great. I've been looking for a business for 14 months. I found the perfect one. The biz has $620,000 of seller's discretionary earnings. My rule is never to pay more than three times multiple. The SBA has pre-qualified it at $2.5 million. That's too high above my multiple rule. Should I just move on or try to negotiate them down? By the way, sales and profits have been growing steadily for the last 3 years. So here's my advice. I didn't bother sending advice, but here's my advice to that person. Yeah, you should definitely move on. You should go get a job. Because when you have that type of rigid thinking and not being able to be flexible and recognize where there's a good business, and oftentimes you have to pay a premium for a good business. You want to negotiate good terms. But if you're so rigid, what makes you the expert to say you're only going to pay 3 times? Like, like you just pull that out of your rear end. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so having hard rules, you want to have your 5 golden rules, but you get in and you evaluate the business. And I know, Joseph, you're on this call. We just went through this last week and looked at it. Should you move up? Right? And sometimes it makes sense and other times it doesn't. But if you have these hard rules, you can have a rule that says, I'm only going to pay a 3 times multiple for X type of business because that's the going rate. It should never be more than that. That's where I get my return on investment. That's fine. But this global idea of I'm only going to pay 3 times, there's a reason why this individual has been looking for a business for 14 months. And I guarantee you, we can come back together, all of us, and visit that group in 14 months. He'll still be looking. It's just not going to happen. So you want to be flexible, reasonable, but having hard rules that don't make any sense, you're just not going to get to the finish line. And oh, by the way, I forgot the other part is he said it's 40% recurring revenue and a 12-year-old company. Their product is fairly exclusive. I mean, hello, give me a break. I mean, they should be like, you should be able to, if that is all true, like before you finish reading the deck, you should put in an indication of interest. So it's just, that's why the stats in this industry sometimes are so mind-boggling, about the percentage of people that don't complete a transaction for no reason. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but you got to be open-minded, flexible. There's certain times you have to draw a line in the sand if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't subscribe to your golden rules. But having some flexibility is really important because you want to have that mindset, especially even going into the conversations to establish a meaningful relationship with a seller. Sorry to go on a little bit of a rant, but that type of stuff just drives me bonkers. Joseph Evangelista, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Nice to see you. We spoke last Saturday, I think, right?
Yes, we did. I'd gladly take that business you just referenced from the forum. I'll
Yeah,
take
me
that
too.
any day.
Yes.
5x, no problem.
Me too.
So I came across a business where the broker basically has a sim template not a sim, an LOI template that they want to use. The terms really within that are, in my opinion, a little unreasonable. One, for instance, was that they had an escrow that they wanted to hold as a down payment throughout the LOI, which I thought was pretty high, and I would want the escrow with my lawyer rather than the broker. And I think there's a couple of things that really stuck out in that way. What's your advice on kind of negotiating that out, especially if you're not 100% sure going forward with the business at the end of the day? Because they're holding back a lot of information as it is.
I agree with the first part 100%. You want to put the money into with your attorney, and any broker who has a problem with it, you've got to question the whole issue because that money is meaningless. It doesn't matter if you put up $1 or you put up $100,000. And Mary and Todd, we just had this last week when we were talking about originally the amount that put down, because an LOI, you should be able to be able to drive a Peterbilt truck through it because there's certain parts of it. It's not binding on the buyer. It's potentially binding on the seller. So the escrow amount is meaningless because the buyer can get it back at their sole and absolute discretion for any reason or no reason whatsoever if they decide they want to go through the transaction, as long as you comply with meeting the dates. So in other words, if the LOI says for a period of you have 45 days or whatever. During that time, for any reason, you get up on the wrong side of the bed and you want to cancel the deal, you get your money back. So no, you put the money with your attorney, number one. As far as the other conditions of the deal, anything you could strike them. Usually the broker LOIs are usually okay. They're not great, but they're okay. And so what I would suggest you do is take that. I would put in the contingencies that are unique to this particular deal, and then let them know that you're going to strike certain things. Verify it with your attorney. You don't want to have your attorney draft a whole new LOI if possible, because it's a waste of money. I mean, it's a pretty template document. And so I would look at this, see, is this thing usable? Which state are you in? By the way, are you in state where it's you want to check, by the way, you're in Jersey, right?
Yes.
In Jersey. I'm supposed to ask you what exit.
New Jersey.
In Jersey. So you should find out that in the state of New Jersey, the real estate business brokers have to hold a real estate license, I think.
Not positive, but most of them do offer real estate, and there's a fair amount of them that are real estate brokers.
Step one, I would look at this template and say, can I use this template with striking a few things? If not, tell the broker, look, it's not usable, but I'm sincere about this business. I'm not trying to go behind your back. I'm going to get a proper LOI drafted. You will be comfortable with it. The seller will be comfortable with it. And that's the way I want to proceed, because I'm happy to use yours, but I'm going to end up dicing and slicing it.
Yeah, I guess where I kind of sat was, I'm not sure it's the right business because they're withholding a fair amount of information, but it has good enough bones to move forward, at least to get that information. My concern was, if I'm pushing back significantly on this broker, does that degrade the relationship when they have another business that makes more sense later?
It can, as long as you demonstrate complete sincerity and telling them, look, here's what I'm concerned about. I'm not saying your document isn't good. You want to have an LOI that forces them to provide you with the first contingency is, I need to get the following information or financials. So I think if you sit with them, are they located near you?
Not too far away. I could definitely get there.
Like
probably an hour drive.
I would go meet them face to face.
Yeah.
And convey, say, look, I made this trip to demonstrate to you I'm for real. Okay. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not trying to be a smart ass. I just want to do things in the right way. I'm not comfortable with this LOI. I'm going to get an LOI written that you are not going to be uncomfortable with, but it's just not this. Okay. And that's the way I want to proceed, because I'm serious about going to the next step. Say, the problem with this LOI, if I send this to my attorney, he's going to carve it to shreds. And then we're going to just waste an inordinate amount of time. I want to get something written up, presented to you quickly so that we could move forward, because every broker loves the idea of a good LOI in front of them fast that they could present to a seller. So that, and I would definitely go see them in person.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And then, if this one deal doesn't work out, they're always going to have in the back of mind, hey, this guy, Joseph, he got into a car, drove an hour just to explain things properly to me. And if someone doesn't see the goodness in you out of that, I mean, what kind of broker are they altogether? But that's the way I would go about doing it. Not saying like, no way, I'm not doing this. Go explain to them why.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Marcos. Oh, so nice to meet you. There he is.
Really nice to meet you, Richard. Great opportunity having this live Q&A session with you personally and being with you all. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Of course.
I had a previous commitment with my wife and son. That's why I'm in the car. So I apologize for that.
No, just happy to have you. And you're out of the country, right? In South America?
Yeah.
Brazil?
I'm in Brazil. I'm in São Paulo. Well, I'm in the beginning of the buying process. I've created a search fund, or I must call a finder search. I'm going to change the term. A finder search, not a search.
Not a searcher, you're a finder. Yeah.
A finder, yeah. My question is related to the LOI. I've noticed one previous question about it, but my question to you is, at what moment in the evaluation process should we be comfortable with presenting an LOI? Of course, it's a non-binding offer, but it's a lot of commitment afterwards, the LOI, in terms of time for both the seller and me, the due diligence costs and so on. So at what moment should we be comfortable with presenting the LOI during the evaluation process of the segment and the company?
Okay. So first of all, it's great to see you, and it's nice to have someone out of the country. And I know we had a couple of emails, so I appreciate you joining. You want to submit an LOI at the moment that you feel comfortable about moving forward with the business based upon the information that you have, because you don't always have the luxury of having all the information that you need to say absolutely. So as soon as you feel comfortable that you've got the financials, you've met with the seller, you have a decent enough understanding, and you believe that based on the information that you have at that point, assuming no crazy changes, that yes, I would like to buy this business. That doesn't mean you're going to buy it, but you've in your mind come to the decision that based upon what I have and what I know, I'm comfortable moving ahead with these price and terms to acquire this business. Where you have to be careful to avoid what you alluded to of spending an inordinate amount of time and tons of money and finding out that it just doesn't make sense is you have to have on the LOI a very clear list of what you're missing. Now, the preference is to try to get that information beforehand, but it doesn't always happen. The seller won't disclose it yet. The broker doesn't want it. There's other people looking at the business. So, for example, if you say, well, based on what I have, but I still need to see their tax returns, I need to see the agreements that they have with suppliers or customers, whatever the nature of the business is, what are the things that could go wrong and what information you don't have, you put those within 3 to 5 days of them executing the LOI, they have to provide that information. So then at least you get the LOI, you bind the seller to the price and terms, they provide you that information, and then you maybe decide, not for me, because you got that information quickly. You don't want to wait 60 days down the road and do all this other due diligence to find out that critical information. So that's the way I like to write LOIs, and I'm never afraid to make an offer and put together an LOI, making sure that that critical information or the key contingencies, for example, whether it's a license, whether it's guaranteeing a contract continues, whether it's making sure that a lease gets transferred, those really important things that you're either missing or the contingencies must be satisfied very quickly after the execution of the LOI. And then you avoid wasting a lot of time. And the other point that I'll mention to you is don't be afraid of submitting offers. You got to get into the habit. Some will work, some won't. You don't want to spend $5,000 with your attorney every time. You don't want to do that, but you've got to get used to making offers.
Okay, just a follow-up question. If
Sure.
I still have some doubts, not in terms of the financials or accounting of the company, more the objective due diligence issues, but if I still have some doubts in terms of market trends, competition, uh, maybe I should not present an LOI, right? I should have these questions answered before it. Is that correct?
Yes, if you can get them answered, that's why I always implore people that your due diligence should start the day the business is of interest to you, for the exact reasons of the industry, the market, competition. The earlier you can evaluate that, the better, because unless you're in that particular site, if you don't have that information, which was the foundation of what I first said, if you don't have that information, then you just have to consider, are there other people in the mix? Meaning other buyers, and is there a chance you're going to lose the deal? And so if there is, then you have to make a decision whether or not to go forward. However, if that threat doesn't exist, the more you can learn about the business pre-LOI, the better, because the idea behind an LOI is you want to lock it up and you don't want to have to retrade it and renegotiate it. I mean, you go into an LOI because you don't want to back out. It happens for certain reasons, but if you're the last part of it is personal to you. If you're not comfortable, don't submit an LOI. Once you get past the first or second one, you'll get more comfortable, I promise you. But if you really feel that there's important information missing and you don't have an operating with a gun to your head as far as another offer, continue to do your research. I know it's a little bit of conflicting information, but if you don't have that pressure, then you keep doing your research. Just don't take forever, because the hardest thing people can't The first one is the hardest. You got to get used to writing offers. And the other thing is, when you get a good template in place, your attorney could take maybe an hour to look at them. That's it. You don't have to put a robust LOI. Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And once again, very nice to be here with you and everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, and appreciate you joining us. Okay, we're good to go. No other burning questions? Everybody's good. Everybody's much smarter now at 4:14 than they were at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Raise your hands if you're smarter now. Okay. Good to see everybody. Have a nice long weekend. I'm not sure if you celebrate that in South America, but it's great to see you, Marcos. Everybody enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and hope to see you next Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, everybody, why we have Memorial Day weekend. Don't forget the meaning of it. Very important. It's not to buy mattresses at 50% off. Remember everybody who, lost their lives for our benefit. So think about everybody. Bye, guys.